Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank you to coming to this evening's meeting and watching it on television, and we'll get started here. Kelly, would you have the roll call, please?
Okay. Ashley Paddock. Here. John Lastly. Absent. Kevin Krulik.
Here.
Keith Campbell.
Here.
Jeremy Lawler.
Here.
Brian Tandy.
Here.
Dan Bayshore.
Here.
Lori Gross. Here. And Allie Mullen. Here.
Okay. We need everyone's had a chance to read the minutes, and if so, I think you have. We get to take a motion to approve them.
I move we approve the minutes from last meeting.
We have a second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Have a roll call, please.
Ashley Paddock. Yes. John Lastly. Kevin Krulik.
Yes.
Keith Campbell.
Yes.
Jeremy Lawler.
Yes.
Brian Tandy.
Yes.
Dan Bayshore.
Yes.
And Lori Gross. Yes.
Okay. Okay, there's anybody has any old business? I haven't seen any. Ben, we have any old business? Okay. New business, Ben, docket number 2032, Duke Realty requesting development plan approval for a new proposed building, number 16 in the Lebanon Business Park. The property is located at an estimated address of 535 South Mount Zion Road. The property is zoned PBI, Planned Business Industrial. Ben?
Very good. Good evening, Plan Commission members. This site was actually before you a couple years ago with the speculative industrial building, and that project didn't happen, but now Duke is coming back with another project. This also is a speculative industrial building, a little bit smaller than the last one. That was a little over 1 million square feet. This is about 600,000, so they've just brought that up. You'll see here the property north is actually to the right on this one. The site doesn't fit very well on the plans, the way to be able to show it north to south. But so the north is to the right, and the property actually extends to the left or to the south. There's an additional piece there that's got some space for some additional development to the south, whereas previously this was fully developed with the 1 million square foot building. So this gives you a little bit of an idea what they're proposing here. It's about a 600,000 square foot industrial warehousing project. You've got all of the employee parking on the north side of the building, and then you got truck access on both the east and west sides of the building, as you see here. As I mentioned, this was before you in 2018. It did receive a number of variances that are actually in play still on this project that you'll see listed in the staff report relating to fence standards, drive width for truck access, parking lot perimeter and parking lot interior landscaping, relating again to the truck access areas. Parking curb, also related to the truck access areas, and then the screening requirements for dumpsters. This project is slightly different than what you see before, so some of these variances they don't actually need because the requirements for the potential tenant here are a little bit different, but they did, some of those were in play with related to this development. Just walk through some of the details here. This has been through Technical Advisory Committee, and I did summarize their comments in the staff report. They have worked through many of those comments already. We just suggested in our recommendation any remaining TAC comments be addressed prior to pulling any permits, but they have addressed many of them already, including already receiving stormwater approval. In terms of the development standards, they have met all the applicable development standards of the Unified Development Ordinance related to a project of this type in the Planned Business Industrial Zoning District. Parking, again, I mentioned the employee and customer parking is all on the north end of the building. They do have 185 spaces currently shown and also have future parking indicated on the plan. You'll see here they've got some that they'll be constructing as part of the initial phase. They've got some additional parking that's in this dashed area you see here that can be added as needed for a potential tenant. For a warehouse distribution operation, they're required to have 1 space per employee on the largest shift plus 1 space per vehicle used in the operation. Since the tenant isn't known, it's kind of hard to calculate the parking requirement because they don't know how many employees. But they do have flexibility to add spaces as needed for that potential end user. Lighting plan, there's a little bit hard to see the detail on the plan for you tonight, but I'll just mention that they have submitted a plan that meets all the applicable UDO standards. Landscaping plan, Let me see how quickly I can find that for you here. As I mentioned, these are give me a moment. Landscape plan is always the last one in the plans. Let me see if I can find it for you real quick. I have to double check it. Front page here. Well, rather than scrolling through it and taking time on it, I will just mention that they have submitted a landscape plan that meets all of the standards of the PBI zoning district when considering the variances that were approved relating to the truck access area for parking lot perimeter and interior landscaping. I will just pull up the general plan again rather than trying to scroll through this entire document and find that for you, just to kind of talk generally about it. So here's that general plan again. So on the north end, the employee parking area, that does meet all the parking lot perimeter interior landscaping requirements for trees and shrub plantings that are planted along the perimeter of that parking area out along Mount Zion Road. And then they have also included the commercial street landscaping requirements along the entire right-of-way of Mount Zion Road adjacent to the project. So they have met all the there's significant landscaping along Mount Zion Road and around the employee parking area. So the places where they requested a variance on the landscape standards were associated with the truck access areas on the east and west sides as it relates to the trailer parking areas and truck access areas. But everything along Mount Zion Road will be landscaped according to the UDO standards. Finally, signage plan. Again, I mentioned this is a speculative project, so they don't have a tenant to identify at this time, so they have not proposed signage. But we have mentioned that once they have identified a tenant, we would ask that they submit the required signage plan and that it meet all the UDO requirements and receive that approval before they would get any sign permits. Architecturally, let me pull up some of those renderings for you here. I think it's this one. Give you a little bit of an idea what the building looks like here. This is some of the rendering showing the entrance area at the northeast corner of the building. Give you an idea of what you might anticipate a tilt-up concrete panel building with accented entryway areas. Does meet all the applicable architectural standards from the UDO, keeping in mind that large-scale warehouses are exempt from some of our more stringent architectural standards. But any architectural standards that are in play on this building have been met by this design that's being proposed here. So it'll be a quality building in the business park. And so with that, staff finds compliance with the Unified Development requirements for the subject site. And we recommend approval of the subject development plan contingent on the following conditions. Number one, that the applicant adequately address any remaining City of Lebanon Technical Advisory Committee comments prior to application for any building permits. Number two, and I believe this one's already been met, if I'm not mistaken, the applicant received formal drainage approval from the Lebanon Board of Works prior to application for any building permits. And number three is signage plan, that the applicant provide a signage plan that adheres to all applicable UDO standards prior to installation of any signage. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Ben? Don't hear any, Ben. Off the hook. Is our applicant here? Come and speak, please.
Good evening. Nathan Harris, Duke Realty. Address is 8711 River Crossing Boulevard. Ben explained the site and the development pretty well. Before we had a tenant in mind when we came 2 years ago.
Right.
That deal just didn't work out. So we had a lot of pretty much designed just for them, you know, with the driveway and with them, things of that nature. This proposed development's pretty generic, so it meets a lot of the normal development standards. So the variances that we had already received apply on this one as well. This will be a speculative development. We plan to begin construction right away. once we get approval, hopefully. And we're looking forward to it. It's great. It's been a while since we've had a Duke development in Lebanon, so looking forward to it. Be happy to answer any questions.
Anyone have questions for applicant, please? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So, now I'll open up the public hearing now for anyone who would like to speak. You need to make sure before you leave, sign up if you speak, and when you come up, you have to give your name and address, or just your name, and you also, and your address, so that we can get it down. And we're at 3 minutes to speak, and if somebody else has already spoken for you, you don't need to repeat it, but you can all come and talk as long as you're going, but we're going to hold you to 3 minutes, okay? So anybody in the audience like to come and speak first on this one? I don't see anyone clamoring to get up here, so we'll close the public hearing, okay? So I would entertain a motion for docket number 20-32.
I'll move that we approve docket 2032 pending on TAC comments are met, stormwater approval is met, and the signage plan is met once they include it.
You have a second?
I'll second.
You have a second. Okay. Kelly, would you call the roll, please?
Okay, Ashley Paddock,
Yes.
Kevin Krulik,
Yes.
Keith Campbell,
Yes.
Jeremy Lawler,
Yes.
Brian Tandy,
Yes.
Dan Bayshore,
Yes.
Lori Gross,
Yes.
Ally Mullen.
Yes.
Okay. The motion passed, and congratulations. Okay. Second thing on the docket is docket number 20-33, Grand Communities requesting rezoning to a PUD planned unit development for a 115-lot single-family residential subdivision. The property is zoned SF2, single-family residential. The property is 57.49 acre parcel between John Bart Road and Edgewood Drive and Washington Street and Fordyce Road. Ben?
All right, first before we get into the details of the PUD rezone and the preliminary plan, which is the third item, I guess, on the agenda, I'll walk through a little bit about the process as it relates to this. We have had a few of these over the last couple of years, but I did want to walk through the process again, both for some of our new Plan Commission members and also members in the audience. So this is a PUD rezone. PUD stands for Plan Unit Development. And what that does is that it establishes the specific standards associated with this development, particularly where it's unique from our Unified Development Ordinance. So what it does is it establishes an underlying zoning district, which in this case is single-family residential SF2, and that establishes the base standards that you're essentially building from or changing from. Both the uses that are permitted and the standards associated with it. So in this case, SF2, the uses permitted here are based on the SF2 zoning district, which is essentially single-family residential and other associated residential uses. There are no other uses other than residential uses that are being proposed here. They haven't written any into the PUD ordinance. So it's all based on the uses that are permitted in the SF2 zoning district. So it is a single-family residential use. And then in terms of process, the PUD rezone is something that the Plan Commission reviews and provides a recommendation to the Common Council. It then is the Common Council's responsibility to approve or deny the PUD ordinance and the PUD rezone. So that's the step we're in now, is for the Plan Commission to review the PUD ordinance and look at all the standards that have been proposed, determine either a positive or negative recommendation of the PUD rezone, and then pass that along to the council to determine what happens with that PUD ordinance. Accompanying the PUD rezone, which establishes the standards, is the preliminary plan, which is the last item on the agenda. And the preliminary plan essentially takes those standards that are proposed in the PUD ordinance and puts them on paper, as in the road layout, the lot layouts based on the lot standards proposed. and then also drainage, et cetera, utilities that are necessary to serve that site. So that's the second item here. And that would be an approval or denial of the plan commission. That preliminary plan doesn't also go to the council. So the PUD rezone does go to the council for adoption. The preliminary plan is an item that the plan commission then approves that establishes that layout. So to go specifically, if they can pull up the computer here, this is the concept plan associated with the PUD rezone. To give you a little bit of idea of some of the large scale items here. This is a piece of property on East Washington Street. Edgewood is to the west, Morningside is to the north. This was originally proposed back in the 70s as an additional section or sections of Edgewood. There were lots that were platted at the south and north end for that extension, but that never happened. So this is something that's been planned for residential development since the 70s, but never moved forward. So at this time, we have an applicant that's come forward that is interested in purchasing this property and developing it for residential development. As you can see here, it's 115 lots. They have an existing stub street, the south end off of Edgewood, that they will be utilizing. At the north end, there was a stub street that you can kind of see in this area. It was meant to provide access to this area when it was intended to be an extension of Edgewood. Since it's now not necessarily an extension of Edgewood, they preferred to have their own entrance off of Fordyce. So they are purchasing a property off of Fordyce Road that allows them to have access from Fordyce Road on the north end. I will walk through some of the elements of the PUD ordinance for you here. First would be the development standards. What we do is we provide an analysis of their requested requirements as compared to the SF2 zoning district, and we did provide that in the staff report. The primary difference that you'll see here is actually the lot size. So this is also a unique property in that there's quite a bit of floodplain associated with the creek that runs on the east and south sides of the property. In that floodplain, there are some fairly significant restrictions for development. So what they've done is, in essence, they've developed the parts of the property that they're able to, and then they're going to leave the rest of it undeveloped. So what they've done is, rather than spreading 115 lots over the entire 50-plus acres, they've essentially taken those lots and condensed them down into the part of the property that they could develop, and left the rest of it alone for detention and for the floodplain area. So you'll see here that the SF2 standard for lot area is 9,000 square feet. Their minimum lot area that they're requesting is 6,600. And then the lot width is 75 feet in SF2, and they're requesting 55. Primarily, as you go down the list, everything else is similar. Lot frontage is the same. Front yard setbacks are the same. Side yard setbacks go from 7.5 to 7, and on down, they're primarily the same. They did request a slightly smaller one-story minimum square footage requirement down to 1,200 as opposed to 1,500. Otherwise, your typical development standards for lot sizes and setbacks are very similar to the SF2 requirements. On the architectural side, we did spend a lot of time with them to develop the architectural standards for this neighborhood to make sure we're getting a quality product. And I have outlined some of the summary of that in here. The first is the anti-monotony requirements, in essence making sure that homes built adjacent to each other are not similar. So they do have a requirement that you can't build the same front elevation on any adjacent lot or across the street from an existing home, to make sure that there's some variation in the front elevations, both from the floor plan that's used and then also the elevation perspective. And actually, I think the applicant may talk about it, but I think they looked at this anti-monotony requirement ensures that no more than 30% of the homes in this neighborhood can be built with the same front elevation. So it does guarantee that you got some differentiation between the homes. On a corner lot, the side of the home facing the street is important because that's something that's going to be visible from a street. So we wanted to make sure that that side that faces the street has windows to break up that facade. So on a ranch home, there would be at least one window, and on a two-story that there would be two windows, again, to break up that facade. In addition, we also have landscaping requirements for both the front yard and then also the side yard if it's a corner lot, again, to provide some additional features on that corner lot to break up what's typically a fairly flat side facade of the house. They also are going to provide side gable overhangs. That's something that's usually critical from myself, again, to provide some dimension on that side of the house. Some homes that are being built don't include those overhangs, and it just reduces the dimension on the side of the house. So doing so really does create an additional feature that's nice here, and they have committed to 11-inch sided gable overhangs. On the siding, they will use exterior materials, including masonry, fiber cement siding, or vinyl siding with a minimum thickness of .044, which is a solid standard for vinyl siding thickness. In addition to that, on the front elevations, they will be required to have a minimum of 50% masonry on the front facade, or if they do not have something less than 50% masonry, then they'd be required to have a minimum of 2 siding styles, like lap siding or shingle siding, vertical siding, etc., and then also include a covered front porch that's a minimum of 32 square feet. So again, creating some variation, additional features on the front elevation. So again, either 50% masonry, or if they have less than 50%, they would have to include 2 siding styles and a covered front porch. The windows on the front facade will have they'll have window grids and either shutters or some other architectural treatment that frames the windows. Again, trying to make sure that that front of the home has an elevated architectural standard. On the roof, we did require dimensional roof shingles rather than the standard 3-tab shingles. Again, something that's a fairly notable upgrade. And then they also varied slightly from our fence standard. The fences would not be permitted at all in any front yard. We would allow fences in the front yard with a restricted height and have 50% open. But in this neighborhood, they would not be permitted in any front yard, which includes both the front yard and then also the side of the corner lot. They wouldn't be permitted. And chain link fencing is not permitted in this neighborhood either. Again, some elevated standards you see here. And then one other thing that has come up on several neighborhoods recently, the standards also do not permit fences in any drainage or utility easements. Again, to just keep the maintenance of those easements accessible. On the landscaping, I did mention that they would, front of the homes would include at least 1 front yard tree and 8 shrubs, and then also a street tree. So there would be 2 trees and 8 shrubs in the front of the house. And then if you're in a corner lot, there would be an additional tree in the side yard, an additional street tree on the street, and then also some additional shrubs along the perimeter of the house. And then a couple other things to note, the perimeter landscaping. This is not something that they're required to do by ordinance, but this is something they've proposed to do to provide some screening to the Edgewood neighborhood to their west. They are proposing, I guess make sure I'm in the right spot. They are proposing on the perimeter with Edgewood to provide a minimum 50-foot. It's actually a common area, so this will be maintained by the HOA. This is common area, and it varies from 50 up to, I think, almost 70 feet, depending on the location. And that common area will be improved with mounding and landscaping to provide screening between them and the Edgewood neighborhood. So there will be a significant landscape screening between those 2 neighborhoods to provide some relief and some privacy to the existing Edgewood neighborhood. And that's something, again, that's not required by ordinance, but something that they were willing to do to provide some additional privacy and screening between their neighborhood and the existing neighbors. In addition, I know there were a lot of questions about the existing wooded area that's in the north end of the property. And it's not shown here because this is just a general concept plan, but they are maintaining that existing wooded area on the north end of the property to provide, again, some relief and screening from the existing Morningside neighborhood. That area is also a common area that we maintain by the HOA. And one thing I'd suggest the Plan Commission to consider is, in addition to just maintaining it as a common area, that I would suggest you also consider some sort of easement that restricts the ability for the HOA in the future to remove trees unless there's something dead or dying that needs to be removed because of those reasons. That way then we can ensure that there's preservation of those trees. What we don't want is 15 years from now the HOA to say we'd really love to have a soccer field there and mow down all those trees and put in a soccer field. There's nothing necessarily right now that would restrict them from doing that in the ordinance. So I would suggest that's something that the Plan Commission may want to consider in addition to, again, just make sure to preserve those trees and down in the future when all of us are gone and somebody else has to make those decisions. So that kind of walks through the PUD ordinance in general. Again, there's some additional information in there. Just wanted to try to highlight as much as possible. This is just the PUD ordinance. I can go in the preliminary plan and a little bit additional detail here. We did get some questions from the public and from neighbors And I can go ahead and address some of those as much as I can right now, and then I know the applicant will do the same here in a little bit. Actually, before I do that, one other item, I almost forgot. I did have a conversation with the applicant earlier today, and they did have a sign concept that they wanted to propose here. Let's see if they pull it up on the overhead here. I don't know that I have it digitally in here just yet. And the reason I bring it up is because we permit by ordinance residential neighborhood signs up to 6 feet in height and 32 square feet for the sign area. And that 6 feet in height is for the sign structure, not just the sign face itself. What they've proposed here is a very nice sign. This element, this horizontal element you see here meets the 6 feet in height, but then they've got this vertical element that you see here that actually extends beyond 6 feet, and that is part of the sign structure. I don't necessarily have a problem with what they've proposed, but we would need to add something to the ordinance that allows that. So I have put together just some language that would allow something like that. Let me see if I can find it real quick for us here. So what I've proposed is language that states, subdivision entry signage may include complementary architectural elements that exceed the maximum height by no more than 50% for a maximum total height of 9 feet. Said architectural elements may be no more than 3 feet in width or depth and make up no more than 25% of the total sign width. Again, what I don't want necessarily to do is just say, well, you can make it 9 feet, and then it ends up being a big sign structure that's all 9 feet. But if they want to include an element like you see here that is a little bit taller, I felt like that was acceptable. And then those guidelines or those restrictions would allow certain elements to be taller, but not the total sign. That's something that I've also proposed that we would include if there is a recommendation from the Planning Commission to address that sign that they've requested. Let me walk through then for the PUD rezone, the decision criteria. Actually, before I do that, I said I was going to address some of the questions that came up from neighboring property owners. So I will do that now. So we did receive 2 letters.
Ben? Hang on
Yes.
a second, we have a question. Yes.
Do you want to wait until we have a public hearing to have any comments?
You just said you wanted to hear from neighboring property.
Yeah, I have letters that I'm going to address now. We'll do a public hearing in a moment, and then everybody else will have a chance to speak. So I'm going to address these that were sent to us in writing because we had them before the meeting, and then everybody else during the public hearing will have a chance to speak. So the question was, what happened? Well, the first question, what happens to the lift station on Fordyce Road in front of the church? There is an existing Morningside lift station that's right at the north end of this property. The utilities have indicated that lift station needs to be taken offline or replaced. It's in bad shape, doesn't work effectively, and there's not a lot of capacity in the system in that area. So actually what's going to happen is that lift station is going to be taken offline, and then all of the existing customers that are sending their waste to that lift station will be redirected to the north, past the Centenary Church property to the lift station. I believe it's the Simplicity lift station that's in the north end of the church's property. So both this neighborhood and any existing customers on that Morningside lift station will be redirected to a lift station to the north that is much newer and works well and has capacity within the system up there. So the applicant is working on obtaining easements from the church to run that sanitary sewer past the church through their property to that Simplicity lift station. So that is what's happening with the lift station. They're going to take that Morningside lift station on Fordyce Road offline and then take all those existing users up to the Simplicity lift station. There's a question about what's going to be done with Fordyce Road on the north end of this property. It's an old farm road that has never had a proper roadbed with no storm sewers. There has been some flooding because of recent heavy rain events. The city is currently under contract and is designing a reconstructed Fordyce Road that would include both the new storm sewer and new road. That design is already underway. The intention is to begin construction, hopefully before the end of 2021, with construction being complete before the end of 2022. So it's our intention to have that road under construction and have all the storm sewer upgraded to address some of those flooding issues along the roadway within the next couple of years. There's a couple of questions then, I'll just note them, but I'll leave it up for the applicant to address. And they asked, why is the existing entry off of Edwidge Drive not being used? at the north end, and why are they asking for a separate entrance? I'll let them address that, because it's really about them providing themselves in their own entrance to this neighborhood to differentiate themselves from the Edgewood neighborhood. The next question, where is the north wet pond going to drain to? It appears to have a discharge to the east, and that is correct. So that north pond has a discharge that heads essentially due east to the legal drain here. And that's how that will drain. There were some questions about an existing private drain, I believe, or an unregulated dry ditch that's along this north property line. This pond will not drain to that existing dry ditch that's along this north property line. There is going to be a pipe that runs directly to the legal drain to the east. And then in terms of drainage in general, there's a lot of questions about the creek and the floodplain and this area flooding. And they are addressing those. They are working with our consultant to make sure that they meet the stormwater ordinance for the city of Lebanon. They have also met with the surveyor's office, and they'll be required to get discharge permits from the county drainage board to discharge stormwater into the ditch. So they are working with all those agencies, and they have to meet the city and county stormwater ordinance for drainage, and they will be doing so. In terms of the floodplain, they can walk through this in more detail, but part of this neighborhood at the south end is in what was existing floodplain. And what they're doing is they're essentially doing cut and fill. So they're going to be filling that area where the lots are located, and they're going to be cutting volume somewhere else. In other words, they're going to be adding volume here and taking it away somewhere else to make sure they're compensating for the floodplain that they're filling. So where they're filling for these lots, then this southeastern pond here is the volume in this pond will compensate for that floodplain that's being filled. So rather than the entire field flooding, the water will just drain into this pond here and fill up when there is a large rain event or flooding event. The other two ponds are there to compensate for the additional runoff created by the neighborhood. So the water will drain from the neighborhood into the storm sewers and into those ponds, and then collect in those ponds and then be released at an acceptable rate into the legal drains from there. So rather than water sheet draining off of that farm field directly into the creek at rates that are unregulated, all the water is going to flow into these ponds and then be regulated in terms of discharge into the creeks to make sure it's not overloading the creek by a large rain event. Let's see. There's a question asked if the homes will be required to pay flood insurance. The answer to that is no. Again, as I mentioned, they'll be raising up any areas that are currently in floodplain where they're building lots, so they will not be in the floodplain anymore and will not be required to pay flood insurance. There was a question about the wooded area on the northeast corner, and I talked about that a little bit already. That's going to be maintained as common area, and I did suggest maybe the Plan Commission consider some additional easement that would regulate the preservation of the wooded area to make sure that doesn't get torn out at some point in the future. Question about whether the developer is going to have covenants and restrictions in place, or whether there's going to be a homeowners association to enforce those. And yes, there will be covenants. They'll be enforced by a homeowners association. The examples that sit here is regulation of storage of recreational vehicles, et cetera. So in addition to any covenants that might restrict that by the homeowners association, any city code related to those items still applies here, and we do regulate storage of those items. So there will be city code that will still be in play, that's in play in the entire city, but then also there'll be some additional covenants and restrictions that will address those. Then the last question on this was, they're showing residential lot development, and they're asking why it's necessary to change the zoning designation to PUD. And if they were reading the PUD correctly, then it would allow other uses other than single-family housing. And that is not true. So the underlying zoning classification, the SF2, regulates the uses, and those are all single-family residential uses. The only way that they could allow anything other than those uses is if they wrote those uses into the PUD ordinance, and they haven't done so. So the only thing that's permitted on this property is what's permitted in the SF2 zoning district, single-family homes. Additional letter we received, a couple of questions here. I think actually more that they had some comments. They were concerned about the large number of small lot sizes will likely only allow for very small starter homes that they believe will negatively impact property values in the Morningside area and on John Part Road. Again, that's something I'll let the the applicant address and what their homes are and their average prices and all those things and how the architectural standards address that. The plans for a PUD call for an entrance off of Fordyce Road. They were concerned about the location and whether it would cause issues on Fordyce Road. We did have the applicant do a traffic study to see whether the traffic created by this neighborhood would cause any issues on adjacent roadways and intersections in the area. And essentially what it came back is that there's no improvements that are needed on any adjacent roadways. The existing traffic volumes on those roads are minimal, and the speed limit is low. So the additional traffic created by this neighborhood is only going to raise the traffic volume slightly and will not create any need for any additional improvements. I believe in summary, that the level of service A is the best level of service, basically means free-flowing traffic. And their traffic study indicated that all the adjacent roadways will maintain level of service A after the neighborhood builds out. And keep in mind, these 115 lots is not all going to happen at the same time. We're talking about 3 to 4 years of development before you see all of those homes. And then the final comment was concerned about the drainage on the property. Again, I've already talked about that generally. I'll let the applicant go into more specifics about how that's going to work. But they are required to meet the stormwater ordinance for the city of Lebanon and all the requirements that are in that stormwater ordinance. And that's going to make sure that the drainage will get no worse than what it is now and likely may improve because we're going to detain the water rather than letting it go directly into the creek. And one of the biggest challenges in this area actually is that Morningside and Edgewood don't have detention in their neighborhoods. So in those neighborhoods, the water is collected directly into a storm sewer system and then dumped directly into the creek. So when the creek backs up, that water just pushes back onto the streets because there's no detention in those neighborhoods. So this is going to have the added ability to detain the water as opposed to sending it directly to the creek. So there's kind of an additional measure to keep the water from backing up onto people's properties. I believe that's everything that I was able to address. I'll let the applicant address some of the other comments and talk about their development, their home specifically. In terms of the decision criteria that are in place for the Plan Commission, there are 5 criteria. The first is the reviewing the extent to which the proposal fulfills the requirements and intent of the comprehensive plan and any other applicable planning studies. We just recently completed an update to our comprehensive plan in 2019, and it indicates that this proposed location should be developed as single-family residential uses. And this land use designation is intended for primarily residential subdivisions of varying lot and dwelling sizes. The defined character may vary by neighborhood, but new development should include mostly single-family homes and transition from the existing development patterns in adjacent neighborhoods. And they should be designed around natural features to highlight existing tree stands, ponds, and watercourses as accessible community amenities. And we've determined that the proposed development by the applicant is consistent with the future land use designation from the 2019 Lebanon Comprehensive Plan and has addressed many of these other items as well. The second one is that the current conditions and the character of current structures and uses in each zoning district. And that the Cedar Ridge PUD is proposed in a location surrounded by residential uses. The existing neighborhoods in the area include primarily single-family units and are similar in character to that which is proposed, albeit with varying densities and lot house sizes. The proposed location is also bordered by agricultural uses and large lot residential properties that are currently outside city limits but are proposed in the comprehensive plan for residential uses as well. So they do propose something that meets the current conditions and characters of surrounding structures. The third is the most desirable use of which the land in each district is adopted. And again, as previously stated, the comprehensive plan contemplates residential uses for this property and would be the most desirable developed use for the subject property. And the property was originally contemplated to be an extension of the Edgewood subdivision, even providing stub streets for access, but since the additional sections were never completed, they're going back and doing so now. So this property has been contemplated for residential development for at least 50 years. The fourth is the conservation of collective property values throughout the city of Lebanon as a whole. The response is not anticipated that the development proposed by the applicant will have a negative impact on property values throughout the city. At a more micro level, the proposed neighborhood is consistent in character and quality with the neighborhoods directly adjacent in the surrounding area. And finally, responsible growth and development. The development is planned for a property that is surrounded by residential development and is either already served by all necessary public utilities or the utilities will be extended at the developer's expense. The proposed development will not cause any undue strain, either financial or otherwise, to city budgets, facilities, or amenities. In addition, the development will be required to meet all applicable standards, including the accommodation of drainage and floodplain, which is critical to the development of this property. So with that staff conclusion, In review of the submitted plan unit development ordinance as presented, Lebanon planning staff finds compliance with the Unified Development Ordinance, established decision criteria, and recommends the Plan Commission forward the plan unit development rezoning ordinance to the Common Council with a favorable recommendation. And I would also add that there should be a condition to that to add to the ordinance the language regarding the subdivision entry sign. I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are already initial questions.
Any member of the Plan Commission have a question for Ben?
Yeah, Ben, I got a question.
Yes, sir.
It says it requires one tree in the front yard and 8 shrubs. Is that all in the front, or are there things required in the back?
There is not anything currently required in the back. The UDO also doesn't require in the back. If there was something we wanted to require, we certainly could, but we're typically just addressing what you see from the street.
Okay, so that's normal then.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Question, Ben.
Yes, sir?
Can the city require, if they're going to have an HOA, can the city actually require a maximum number of percentage of lots filled before the developer has to have the HOA turned over?
They will typically explain that in the covenants and restrictions. It's usually some percentage of lots that's developed before it's turned over.
I know, because where I'm at now, it's like 90%, 80, 98, yeah. It's really high.
Right.
It's kind of ridiculous. And I'm going,
And-
the other
and-
two subdivisions I was in that had HOAs, it was like 50%.
So that neighborhood's a little bit different than what, and I'll let them explain how they do it, but typically what happens is the builder hires a professional firm to manage the HOA before it's turned
Right.
over to the neighbors. I don't believe they've actually done that in your
They never
neighborhood.
did, and they never
Probably,
did mine
probably
neighborhood.
should be.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, our two other neighborhoods under construction right now, that's how they do it. They hire a professional management firm that
Is there a way the
manages.
city can put that in there, though?
It's likely in their, it's not in the PUD ordinance usually. It's something that's typically in the covenants and restrictions. We'll let the applicant address that. I'm assuming it's in the covenants and restrictions how the HOA is turned over to the neighborhood.
Did have another one, but if everybody wants to go in the meantime, I do have another question too, so.
Ben, did you say that this was going to be built within phases?
Yes, yeah, I don't know how many phases they're proposing right now, but it's likely going to be a number of phases.
So when you meet the standards, when you start building, will they require to meet those standards every time they build a phase, say in drainage, flooding? As they build, if something occurs, do they have to come back and fix that?
Correct. So what they'll do is that the first section will include the necessary detention and drainage for that section. As they build the next section, they'll add to that. So yeah, so it's not like the first section, they can say, well, we're going to build our pond in phase 3. They have to build out the drainage infrastructure in the first phase.
The mounding they're planning on doing, is it just on the Edgewood, where it comes up to the back of the Edgewood subdivision? Or is there other mounding on the north end, in the wooded area right against?
Right now, they're not proposing anything adjacent to the wooded area. What they're proposing is to maintain the woods to provide the screening that they would like to see between them and the Morningside neighborhood. So because there's no improvements along the back of the Edgewood neighborhood, they were proposing to put the mounding and landscaping there to provide some buffer between those two, and then maintaining landscaping elsewhere where it already exists.
Would mounding like that actually be more beneficial to the drainage coming into the new retention ponds and everything, or?
Yes and no, it depends on where it's placed. It could actually make it worse. So allowing the water to free flow into the ponds is likely best. The way they're going to do it along that western property line is they're actually going to provide some drainage within that common area as well to make sure that water coming out of Edgewood drains into that common area and gets to the storm sewer appropriately, so it's just not ponding in that area like it probably does in some of those areas now. So they're going to be directing water where they want it to when they make the improvements to the property.
So if there's flooding within that wooded area, will they be required to create drainage to make it drain to the pond?
It already floods, so the water from their neighborhood should not be going into that area, because that's why that pond is there at that north end. So the water in the north end of the neighborhood will all be directed to that pond. So they shouldn't be adding any water to the wooded area that isn't already there from stuff coming out of Morningside, et cetera.
But if they have to maintain that wooded area, wouldn't they need to make sure it doesn't flood? Or is the HOA going to have to worry about that? Do you have to worry about standing water out there?
Not necessarily. I mean, it's already, actually part of it's already a wetland, so there already is some standing water in there when it rains. So the intention here is that they not make anything any worse than it already is, and that's what the detention that they're proposing would do. So they will not be adding any additional water into that wooded area that doesn't already go there when it rains.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have one other question. The retention ponds that are gonna be there, they'll be able to fill up, and then is the creek basically gonna be monitored into the point of, okay, now the creek can now accept this water in, that way, or the retention pond's just gonna be, they'll be able to fill up and then just slowly, is there gonna be any management on the city's part to be able to like hold that water in the retention ponds until the creek's down far enough?
There's an outlet in each of those detention ponds, so there's usually some normal pool level in the ponds, and then
Right.
it's able to fill up to a certain level, and then there's an outlet that then starts releasing that into the creek once it gets to that level. But that obviously restricts how much water can leave the pond at one time, making sure that obviously doesn't go out of the banks of the pond, but it starts releasing it at an acceptable rate. I mean, their drainage study is 500 pages long. With all the calculations that are necessary to figure that out, so I'm doing my best to try to keep it as simple as possible.
But right now, since there's no control and that's a farm field, it basically just all runs right off into the creek area.
Correct,
And now we
correct.
can hold that all back from getting in there at once. And is that what usually causes a lot of the backup north into Morningside?
Yeah, so you've got a field that's just all sheet draining without any regulations directly to the creek. And then you also have some existing neighborhoods that don't have any detention as well, that all that water is being condensed into storm sewer and flowing directly into the creek as well. So that's what's causing the creek to fill up so fast, and then it backs up into those storm sewers. So in this case, they have the additional fail-safe of having detention ponds that can collect the water on the property before releasing it to the creek.
Any other questions? Okay, the applicant, please.
Track it down, and we'll see how they might should flatten out once again.
Good evening. My name is Amanda Webb, and I'm a project planner for Grand Communities. Grand Communities is the affiliated developer for Fisher Homes. I just want to thank you guys for taking the time to hear us tonight. I also want to thank staff. Ben did a great job. So I'm going to try to make my presentation as quick as possible and just give you guys time for questions. So, like I said, I work for Grand Communities, which is the affiliated developer for Fisher Homes. Fisher Homes is a private home builder out of Kentucky. Fisher Homes has been around for quite a while. We recently celebrated our 40th anniversary. Thank you. Fisher Homes, the mission of Fisher Homes is to build the best total home solution. And what that means, that doesn't just mean the home itself, but it also means the community itself. So we take great pride in building sustainable communities that are looking good long-term with landscaping, and we put a lot of money also into continuously investing in our home design. So we try to update our elevations on a regular basis. So we put a lot of emphasis on the community and building a whole home solution. We have several communities in and around the Indianapolis market. One that's very similar to Cedar Ridge that I would recommend is Indigo Run. That's in just southeast of Indianapolis. I believe everybody is pretty familiar with the site. We were here in, I believe it was July for the annexation. So just to give a little bit of context to where the site is, we are sitting here tonight in City Hall, so it's just northeast of here, south of the high school. We'll zoom in a little bit more. We're north of Washington Street and accessing off of Fordyce Road. This is just a copy of our site plan, just a view of it. As Ben had mentioned, we're looking at just under 58 acres. 115 home sites are being proposed currently. The site plan here depicts, it shows how much we are preserving of the land. We're looking to preserve around 50% of the open space, and I just think that this image does a really good job depicting that. Our primary access point will be coming off of Fordyce Road, and then our secondary access point will go into the Edgewood subdivision area. We are proposing to do some type of possibly a trail or something similar pathway around the pond to kind of amenitize that area. We'll be working with Ben to come up with a good plan on how that will work. Couple things that I want to point out. We are proposing, I talked earlier about a total home solution and that coming down to the community. We are proposing a very efficient plan. Our streets are very efficient, which what that means is it means less maintenance for the city long-term, less utilities, long-term maintenance. So that's something that we are very proud of with this plan. Some additional benefits, we are also bringing our sanitary down through, actually up through the church property. So we will be able to take the Morningside lift station offline. And I believe that's a big help to the city. This right here, it's a computer-generated rendering. Really, this slide does a really good job just kind of showing the relationship of the homes to the open space. It does show the 15 acres of wooded area that we're preserving along the Morningside community. It also shows a good buffer between the Edgewood residents and our new homes. It shows the spacing of that. Go to the next slide here. Also, the computer-generated rendering. This one shows our floodplain to the east, or our floodplain, I'm sorry, our stormwater pond to the east and the compensatory storage pond also, which is there for the floodplain purposes. Just want to kind of go over quickly, just give you guys a vision of what we're looking at. I'm going to go through our product and show you some different elevations, just some sample elevations. This product is generally a one-story ranch and two-story mix. We're looking at anywhere from, I think our smallest single-story, as Ben noted, is right around, it's above 1,200 square foot, but they do go all the way up to 2,900 square feet, and that's just starting, so you can, of course, add different options to that. Here are some sample elevations here. This just shows you a wide variety of styles of our models. We offer a variety of architectural styles. You can see on here we're showing more modern elevations as well as Western craftsmanship, and we even offer coastal elevations. Just want to make sure you guys have a chance to see these. Ben had also noted we spent a lot of time working with the city to make sure we are offering different architectural elements that the city would like to see, so we are committed to that. Some examples of interiors. As I had noted, they are customizable, so once a buyer selects a floor plan, they have options inside in the kitchens. They can do different upgrades. This just shows a few examples of our interior elevations. Ben had mentioned we were looking to add to our signage. So I apologize, this presentation was done prior to the conversations that we had previously to this meeting. So the proposal that Ben presented with adding elevation to the elements, we're very comfortable with, and we appreciate that. We appreciate consideration on that. A similar sign as we're proposing in the lower right-hand corners, Piper Glen, that's one that we did in an existing community, so we just wanted to give you guys some visuals to kind of get something similar of what we're proposing. So some benefits to the city, I just want to go over this really quick. We are providing an efficient street and utility layout, which, as I noted, it minimizes the effects and the maintenance costs long-term. We are committed to collaborating with the city regarding drainage and working with them. We are also providing upgrading and extending off-site sanitary, which will take that Morningside lift station offline. And we're proposing to provide what we feel is diverse architecturally and interesting architectural features on our homes and preserving those natural features. One thing that I do think is really worth noting, I'd like to kind of summarize where we've been. As I believe you guys remember, we were here in June for our annexation. Shortly thereafter, we had a neighborhood meeting. And the neighborhood meeting, it was one of the better neighborhood meetings that we've had. The community was really great. They came out, we listened to their feedback, we took their feedback into consideration. We had at that meeting that night, I would say between 25 and 30 people. There were also several people here previously with the annexation, and I think just having that community meeting really built a good relationship with the neighbors, and we talked through any of their concerns. So I just wanted to point that out. I think that was a really productive meeting, and it was very important that we had that. We also received approval from City Council last month, and then we also had our Technical Advisory Committee meeting, which, again, we took the feedback from City, and we are committed to working with the city. Our next step is to be here tonight to get your feedback and hopefully receive a positive recommendation. Does anybody have any questions, or is there anything I can help elaborate on? I think Ben did a really great job with his presentation, so.
Anybody on the commission have a question?
The HOA standards, I mean, do you know what they are in the other subdivisions you were already in here in Indiana?
Can you elaborate on what standards are you looking for?
Oh,
The turnover rate?
When the HOA gets turned over to the residents of the
Sure.
community?
A couple of colleagues. 100%, usually 100% of the time.
When it gets turned, is that when it gets turned over, when 100% is billed?
Yes.
Okay. Or is it when it's 50% billed, then it gets turned over to
Yeah.
them? And they keep managing. I know it's been done a couple different ways.
My name is, just for the record, my name is Jason Wisniewski. I am the Vice President of Planning and Zoning with Grand Communities.
Okay.
Typically what we do, sir, is turn over our HOAs back to the community with the sale of the final home to a third party. That's not always the case, but that's just traditionally how we do it. And the reason that we do it that way, just to put a little color to it, is home building is what we do. Our boards are Fisher Homes associates, so kind of how we view it is it's a free service where you get the expertise of people who are in the business and know the business and know how to run these communities, basically to set up their financial strength for the future.
So it's managed up by you guys, by a certain management side of your company that basically takes care of it and then teaches.
Yeah, so we do contract with outside management companies as well to zone not to zone, but to enforce the CC&Rs, the policies of those, things like boat storage and, cleaning of siding and things like that.
Appreciate your answer, thank you.
Is there anything else?
Anyone else have a question? I have a question on the HOA myself. Could you step back up there, sir, in a minute?
Sure.
I have a question about what would you put in that HOA?
I'm sorry?
Would the HOA not make the mistake that we're having in another place of coming up with rules for themselves that's against the city ordinance?
Yeah, so if I'm hearing you correctly, sir, the issue is that we have CCNRs that are not in alignment with city ordinances, is that correct?
Well, there are some.
Yes,
There has
and
been
that's,
some. And I'm
again,
not saying you are. We just like to see it, I think, somewhere down the road here.
yeah, but we always want, again, the ordinance is always the overriding factor in those, and
Right.
that's something that, again, we always try to make sure our CCNRs are in addition to not conflicting with city ordinances.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else on the board have something to say? Okay. We open this up to the public hearing, please, and if you'd like to come to the microphone. Yes. Come to the microphone, give your name and your address, please, and we'll hold it to 3 minutes, please.
Thank you. I'm Paul Weary, Chip Weary, 1015 Brookside Drive. Backing up on this, our two lots that our house is built on are the two lowest lots in Morningside. Terribly concerned about drainage. The ditch behind our house is all part of Morningside. It goes to Man Ditch, goes to Prairie Creek and away. I need to make sure, number one, that the drainage from this subdivision goes past our house into Prairie Creek rather than something that drains into what's going to back up on us and flood me. That's my primary concern. My secondary concern, two or three, is this area annexed into the city of Lebanon? I haven't heard that.
Yes, it is.
Okay, that's fine. I hadn't heard that. And the two entrances and exits are just Fordyce and Edgewood. Is that correct?
That's my understanding of it, yes, sir.
Okay, but like I said, my primary concern is I don't want to get dumped on with flood water and flood. We flooded twice. I don't want to flood again. We own our houses on the two lowest lots in Morningside. If the ponds are there, that's great, but they got to drain west of us. They cannot drain east of us or north of us, or else this whole subdivision is going to destroy my home. Can't say anything more. I'm just telling you the truth.
That's right. And I'm sure they'll take that into account.
Well, they need to have me on record saying,
Yep.
they dug on well, better not flood my house.
Well, I don't think that's the intent, but
Well, I
We'll see.
appreciate what you're saying. You don't think that's a problem.
I don't know about, I'm not an engineer as far as the drainage goes, but I'm just saying, I think they've put that into hand, and I think they'll have it under control for you.
I hope they do,
So do I.
because if
Thank
they
you.
don't, I have to ask the question.
Yep, I agree.
If they don't, and I flood, who do I go after?
Come see
Being
the
honest,
city, I
who do I
guess.
go after?
I'd assume you'd have to come and see the builder,
What?
the builder there. That'd be my guess. I don't know, the city.
Just
That-
to shed
That doesn't help me. That doesn't help me. I don't want to flood and make up for it. I just want to make sure ahead of time with this, I have no problem with the subdivision. I've got no problem at all with it. I just don't want to be flooded by it.
I don't disagree. I wouldn't mind the flood either, so.
So I need to know if in fact it happens and they build this subdivision and my house has a swimming pool for my lower level, I need to know who to go after. And I need to be on record with this group that says, I've asked that so that you know who I need to go after.
To talk,
I can't be any plainer than that.
1 minute left.
Well, I'm listening.
Okay, Kevin?
okay, just to talk a little bit about, and it's been mentioned, but all the water, all the runoff that is created by this neighborhood, all the water that would fall in this neighborhood will be captured by a storm sewer system and transported to a series of interconnected ponds that will outlet directly into either the man ditch or the,
It's got to be Prairie Creek.
well,
Man ditch back to
Prairie
property.
Creek is not on their property. They cannot outlet to Prairie Creek.
Neither
and-
is the ditch that goes behind my house.
Right, and you
The ditch
mentioned,
behind my house is Morningside.
Right,
It's
and-
not dedicated.
you're right, it's on Morningside's property. I've been back there. It is in desperate need of maintenance. I'm not for sure when the last time Morningside maintained the
Not
ditch.
since we built the house 30 years ago.
Okay, so there's maybe that's maybe an entity you should look into, is the Morningside neighborhood, and where is their responsibility for maintaining that ditch?
That's fine, but water is going to go to the shallowest area. And if they dump it in and it comes up Man Ditch and comes back to my house, I'm flooded. It's got to go west or south. It has to. I'm sorry.
The man
It
ditch
has
is to the south of their property.
What?
The man ditch wraps around
Man
the east
Ditch is
side.
east and south of my property.
Yes, and it's east and south of their property as well.
That's fine. But they got to make doggone sure it goes away, rather than backs back up again.
That's why I was asking the question. I actually know for a fact there's actually 2 members on the board. We're dealing with flood issues in our own subdivision right now because of things the developer didn't do. So,
Right.
well, I feel for your interest. That's why I was asking the questions that I was asking.
I'm sorry, with masks, I can't tell who I'm talking to, but I'm listening. I hear you.
And
I'm
so
listening.
That's why I asked Ben the questions. I was like, so is this, that's why I think it's gonna end up being a benefit to the Morningside subdivision because it will allow more volume to go into the ditches from Morningside that right now is being held up by all the others. That right
Okay.
now, because what happens is that the field floods into there, fills the creek first before Morningside has a chance. With this, they'll be able to control that. It won't go in there initially, and it will let Morningside.
That sounds
drain
good,
first.
but what the first gentleman was speaking about was they're gonna build all the houses up so they're out of the floodplain. That dumps the water my way.
It wouldn't necessarily do that if the drainage ponds are actually put there in place.
They
Because-
need
because-
to be-
Because they'll be dug deeper. than what the
I'm
flood
sorry,
plain is.
doggone, I'm being polite. They need to be doggone well planned that they go into the ponds. If they build the ditches up, then you're dumping on thy neighbor, and that's illegal. And I don't want to be dumped on.
I'm on your side with that one.
That's fine, I appreciate that. I want to be on record so that I know who to chase if this happens to me. Please tell me. Please tell me. I'm not trying to be a pain in the butt. Just please tell me. I don't want to flood again.
It's the city's responsibility to make sure that
Right.
the developer follows the EPA standards and everything else for drainage and everything else. And the city has to follow those same standards.
We have a stormwater ordinance that's in place that they will be required to adhere to. They have consultants that are designing it in accordance with that. We have third-party consultants for the city that are reviewing their calculations to ensure they're in compliance with that. The water that is draining from the field now will be captured by their storm sewer system and taken to their detention system so it can be slowly released to the man ditch as it is modeled with the entire subdivision. So they're modeling the ditch, they're modeling their ponds, they're looking at how their water affects the elevations of the water in the ditch. And they, per permitting requirements, they are not allowed to increase those flood stages of the man ditch with their development. They have to hold that water, they have to slowly release it so that they do not increase those 100-year flood elevations from the ditch.
That's all fine. I keep my ditch as clean as I can.
Understood.
I just had triple bypass this summer, so this year I didn't get out in the ditch and drain everything out of it that had fallen,
Sir,
but I have done that.
I thank you for
the
your
last
time.
31 years that I've lived in the house. I've flooded twice, thankfully, to whomever was involved. The bridge on Kersey Drive was removed, and that removed a huge restriction on Prairie Creek,
Okay.
and that's helped. Thank you.
Thank you,
To
Mr.
whomever
Webb.
was involved. But I don't want to flood again with
Your
this.
time
new
is up,
subdivision.
sir.
I'm sorry.
Thank
My
you.
time can be up. I'm still saying, I don't want to flood again.
We've heard you, thank you. Okay? We have some others who would like to speak too.
That's fine. Go
Who's
ahead.
next? Ben?
Let me just real quickly, in terms of the public hearing, we'll allow everybody to
Right.
address their comments and questions, and then we'll answer them all once the public hearing is
Right.
closed, as
Okay.
opposed to interacting
Right.
back and forth during a
Right.
public hearing. So
Okay.
let's allow everybody to provide
That's
their
fine.
comments, and then we'll address them at the end.
So who's next? Anyone? Come right up.
Good evening. Carmen Ottinger, 905 Fordyce. I've got a couple questions. First of all, the sign, the new sign you're proposing, where is it going? Do you know on
Well,
which side of the drive, east or west?
just ask the question and they'll write them
Oh,
down.
okay,
And
east
then
or
they'll
west.
answer them, okay?
It looks pretty big, and I don't see other additions that are being built in town with that large a sign, so I'm very opposed, because it's going to be right in my yard. So I'm very opposed to that large a sign. I don't think we need that big a sign. I don't see that large a sign in other additions that are being built, as we've driven around and looked at new additions, and I don't see anything that large. Morningside doesn't even have signs that says it's Morningside Edition. So I don't think we need that large a sign, especially out in my front yard. And are there going to be two or just one? This is a different drawing that was given to us at the July community meeting at the church, this proposal of the proposed homes. And I might correct her to say, yes, it was a lovely meeting, but not all in attendance were extremely happy with that meeting. So after the meeting, that was not a happy meeting afterwards. So she's getting, I think, the wrong idea of how that meeting went. This is a different drawing that was given that night. Entrances are different than what was proposed to us that night. So that's a little different. So I don't know that those that attended that night have seen this updated drawing of entrances. We all feel there's way too many houses in that area. I think the proposed addition
You have 1 minute.
from a few years ago had lesser homes. Was that all? Anybody else came with me? Is that all the questions we needed? But we're right there at the entrance. We're hating to see a beautiful house and garden being taken down for an entrance. And the traffic study, I'm sorry, that's a laugh. I sometimes have to have an appointment to get out of my driveway to get onto Fordyce, depending on the day and the time.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, my name's Chuck Daly, 401 Edgewood Drive, and also 950 East Washington Street, St. Peter's Episcopal Church. Two questions, actually one question, one comment. One question is, on the southeast side, I'd like to know what they're going to do with the woods in that area right at the creek. We actually have an organic farm and an apiary there. I'd like to keep a buffer between the apiary and any housing that's going in there, okay? So just from a safety standpoint, we're registered apiary. The other question is, I'd also like to know, I also believe that there's a lot of houses really compacted in a small area, and as an engineer, I really also question the traffic pattern too, so, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Yes, David.
Good evening. I just wanted to reemphasize, I was one of the letters that was written with the primary questions, most of which were answered by Ben. Thanks to Christy Spencer for getting back to me and letting me see the preliminary information that was distributed. Just a couple of little points to emphasize. In my letter to you folks, I emphasized the open ditch that Dr. Weary just mentioned behind the lots on Morningside. It's not a dedicated drain. It's just an open ditch. And the city of Lebanon approved that area when they developed that section. There's nothing that I'm aware of that says that the residents there are supposed to maintain that. You go back and look at section 4, I believe is what it is, because the drainage easements that were actually put in place on that particular property were lessened by the Boone County Drainage Board. And mentioning the Drainage Board, when I checked with them last week, I don't think anybody from the group with the folks from Kentucky had yet spoken to them. At least when I spoke with staff the middle of last week, it was the first mention that they were aware of that Cedar Ridge was proposing drainage in there. Now maybe they've spoken with the city's stormwater board, that's a different entity, but my concern, I believe, and what I'm addressing to you is not just what Morningside is. All of Morningside is draining down into that open ditch that flows into Man, legal ditch. Man legal ditch completely encircles the proposed development and dumps into Prairie Creek right at the intersection of Washington Street and Grant. So there's still more water coming in there at some point, even though it may be a controlled flow. I understand that concept. I'm okay with that. But it's still drainage, drainage, drainage. And the lady that was just up here emphasized the map that was presented at the meeting to the Methodist Church was indeed different. It showed the entryway coming off of Edgewood Drive as the primary. The new plan that you folks are looking at, the first 2 lots in the entryway coming off of Fordyce do take out a home there and a garden. I'm not sure, that's none of my business, that's the homeowner's business. But the original map that was shown to the people that attended that meeting, which I didn't get to go to, I was out of town, but looking at that particular map, that's not what the people saw when they were proposed with the overall preliminary items. So just food for thought, folks. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? I don't see anyone else coming to the mic, so we'll close this public hearing, please. Okay, now, we need to, Ben, you guys need to come back and answer the questions, okay?
Yeah, the applicant may have some additional comments on some of the questions or comments. Just a couple of things. I did mention the traffic study that was completed by A&F Engineering. They're probably the premier traffic engineers in the state of Indiana. They do traffic studies like this all the time. They have a model that determines how many trips this neighborhood is going to generate, then it distributes those to the existing road network and then figures out how that's going to impact the existing level of service. So all the Fordyce Road and those areas are all to level service A right now based on traffic counts, and those are average traffic counts. It's not to say that if you're leaving your home at a certain time, there may not be 5 or 6 cars that are coming you have to wait on. But overall, on the average is level service A, and the 115 lots and the trips those generate don't change that level of service at all. And usually you wouldn't even make any or recommend any improvements until you get to probably level of service D. So even if we were going from level service A to level service B, it still wouldn't recommend any changes. So yes, it is. Is it going to generate additional traffic? Yes. But is it going to change the traffic patterns or the level of service? It will not, based on their study. We've already discussed drainage. I'm not sure there's anything else really to say there. They are required to make sure that their runoff is no greater than what it is already today. This property already generates stormwater runoff. And so they've got those calculations, and the post-development conditions can generate no more runoff volume at any time than what's already happening now. So if they've met, those calculations are all done correctly, and we've all done our job of reviewing that, it should not generate any more stormwater volume in the legal ditch than is already entering the ditch today from that property. And in fact, it'll regulate the amount that happens over time now where it doesn't now. So again, it's not going to make it any worse. I can't say it's going to make it better because there is already flooding in that area, but it will not make it worse. I'll let the applicant, I know there were some questions about the sign location and size, I'll let them address that. Those are, I think, the two primary ones that are brought up. Again, I just mentioned in terms of the woods to the north, I would recommend that you consider adding something to the ordinance that indicates that that would be preserved and only allow removal of trees if they're dead or decaying, and it would cause some sort of safety issue, just to make sure that 15 years down the road, somebody doesn't have a different idea what that area might be used for. And I guess there was a question about, excuse me, the southeast along the creek, what's going to be happening to the trees in that area. The creek actually has a 75-foot easement on either side of the creek that cannot be improved in any way, shape, or form, and that's a regulated drain easement that is regulated by the county. And so that it's on 75 feet on either side of that creek cannot be improved and is going to remain as it is today. So there is a pretty significant 150-foot wide area that would not be touched related to the creek on that south and east side of the property. Again, there was questions about, this has not gone to the county drainage board yet. It is being reviewed by the surveyor's office that provides recommendations to the drainage board, so it is going through review, but it has not made it to a drainage board meeting yet. That's still upcoming. There's still a lot of review that has to be done in terms of the drainage and approvals from the city and the county. So that is underway and would be part of the construction plan process moving forward. I think that's all I am able to respond to. I'll let the applicant address them as well.
Again, Jason Wisniewski with Grant Communities. I'm going to let Ms. Webb answer the question about the signage, but I wanted to address the comments about the site plan. So on July 23rd, Grant Communities held a neighborhood meeting at the Centenary Church, just north of the property, at which time I myself presented to, as Ms. Webb mentioned, about 25, 30 people. We didn't take an attendance list, but rough count. I presented that plan. I presented a PowerPoint show very similar to tonight, and I will stand here on record and say the plan that you have seen tonight is the exact same plan as I spoke to on July 23rd. I was very clear that the main entrance was off of Fordyce Road. We have under contract a home off of Fordyce Road that allows us to make that connection. We are showing the entrance to the southwest, again, to give it two forms of ingress and egress for residents and primarily for EMS. We are not making the northern connection. I'm not sure the name of that road, but there is a connection, an existing street stub into the property at the northwest corner that we are not connecting. At that time, residents asked us, they said, do you even need the one to the southwest? And I said, hey, look, one entrance, two entrances, three entrances, we can make it work either way, but, that's something that we don't always have a say in the final outcome of that. But my point is, the plan that you are seeing is the exact same plan that they saw then. It has not changed. That rendering is the same. And again, I just wanted to go on the record, having been the one standing there a couple months ago, I wanted to just make that clear. Thank you.
Thank you.
In regarding the entrance and the signage, currently on the west side of our entrance, there is some open space area, and currently the intent would be for the sign to be in that open space in the west side of the entrance off of Fordyce. Thank you.
Ben, can you show that map that shows that the southeast corner is, oh, this one right there. Don't move. Are you worried about this, the gentleman from, I think, 401 Edgewood is worried about the southeast corner? There's a very large buffer due to retention anyways.
You've got 75 feet on both sides?
Yes, there's 75 feet on both sides of the ditch, so you see, if they can pull, whoops, it's still showing the other. Yeah, you can kind of see it on that plan
You see the
too.
church property in the lower right.
Yeah.
5 in each, yeah.
So other than the ditch, there's a very large buffer of foot traffic if
Yes,
you're
yeah,
worried about it.
and there, no improvements are permitted within that 75-foot easement that's on either side of the ditch. They maintain any existing vegetation that's there. That's the county's requirement, so the lots couldn't even extend into that area, so the entire lot has to be outside of that 75-foot easement, so that there are no improvements within that easement area. So that whole area along that southeast corner will be
We used to
protected.
have a lot of wildlife in that area, like the deer.
For sure.
Like a family of deer, and the last people took over, we had blue deer and that were beautiful in there, and you were supposed to protect them. And they're all gone.
I also want to note that, based on precedent here, any changes in that buffer were between a private resident owner and the developer.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Any changes or fences or buffers were between the private residence owner and the developer. We had no part in any of that, right?
Which buffer?
Just on other neighborhoods that came through recently, the
Oh.
private owner and developer got together and made an agreement.
Oh, yeah, in
We had
terms
no
of
part in any of
improvements
those.
in a buffer
Right.
yard, yeah, that was happening outside. They do have standards that are written to the ordinance related to the buffer they're proposing along the west property line with Edgewood. So those improvements at a minimum will be there, the mounding and landscape treatment. And then, like I said, I had suggested adding some language that would preserve that northeast wooded area as well, to make sure it's clear that area would remain, not just in common area, but there wouldn't be any manner at which it could be destroyed later.
Any other things, Ben?
I just, again, procedurally, you have two items. We've only technically announced the one for the PUD rezone, but then there is also the preliminary plan. We've already discussed all the elements related to the preliminary plan, but there would be two motions then that you would have to be considering tonight. First would be the recommendation, either positive or negative, based on the PUD rezone. Theoretically, potentially subject to the conditions I've already discussed for the preservation area in the north end, and then potentially on the sign. I haven't heard any comments from the Plan Commission related to the sign request. But that would potentially be a second condition on the PUD rezone. And then the second would be approval of the preliminary plan. And I'll just quickly, rather than spending a bunch more time to go through the preliminary plan, because we've already discussed it, I'll just mention in the staff report, once I find it, we have recommended approval of the preliminary plan contingent on the following conditions. One is that they adequately address any remaining TAC comments prior to submission of a secondary plat, and that would be finalizing all the drainage, getting the necessary approvals from the City of Lebanon Board of Works for drainage, getting the necessary approval from the County Surveyor's Office and the County Drainage Board, any other comments related to utilities, et cetera, that have been addressed in the staff report. And second, and it's already somewhat addressed that, but stormwater approval from the City of Lebanon Board of Public Works. And certainly they will also have to get, because they're discharging to a county regulated drain, they'll have to get the approvals from the Drainage Board. And the third is that the approval of the preliminary plan will be subject to the final adoption of the PUD rezone and ordinance by the Lebanon Common Council. So this preliminary plan is based on a PUD rezone that still would theoretically need to be adopted by the Common Council, so we just make it subject to that adoption. Any questions on the procedural elements there?
You have that all down, Brian?
So we're doing them both together?
I would do them separately, because one is a recommendation to the council and the other one is an approval. So we would need a recommendation either positive or negative on the PUD rezone and ordinance, subject to potentially the conditions I mentioned. And then the second would be approval or denial of the preliminary plan, subject to those conditions as well.
For the answer, okay. Okay, we'll open it up again for any questions you have after they've answered your others for a public hearing. Anybody else like to come back and speak?
Just so I understand, are you opening the public hearing for docket item number 20-34?
No, 33. 34, I'm sorry, 34, I'm sorry, yes. Docket 2034, I'm sorry. That's the PUD preliminary plan. So, anybody if you have something to say, come up and say it.
all weary, 1015 Brookside Drive, just totally worried about water and flooding. He was saying we have people that they're going to be doing the work and whatever. Is there anyone that I can, any group that I can talk to express my concerns about flooding our house?
Kevin, who would you say?
Yeah, I mean, he was saying they're gonna be doing this. That's all fine. I still live in my house that I have for the last 31 years.
I mean, the developer is a matter of public record, and, you know, I would encourage them to.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you, I'm
The
sorry.
developer is public record.
I would just suggest if you have concerns with the development, the proposal, that you should reach out to the developer. Another opportunity would be to reach out to the county surveyor and the drainage board, as Manditch is a regulated county drain. And they will have a public hearing at some point in the future, on a public drainage board meeting, that you would also be able to attend and voice any concerns there as well.
Okay, I just need to know who to talk to.
Sure.
Thank you.
Anyone else have a question? Sure. Is there anybody else want to ask? Yeah, so I'm just saying is, anybody else have a question they want to speak to on this issue, on the PUD? And I don't see any, we'll close this public hearing. Okay? Now, I think we're ready for a motion, are we not, on both of them? On docket 2033, right? That's the only one, right? Docket number 2033, I'd entertain a motion.
I would make a motion that we send to council a positive recommendation for docket 20-33, Cedar Ridge PUD by Grant Communities, contingent upon the addition of the preservation easement as described by staff, as well as the addition of the language associated with the sign into the ordinance as well.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Okay, would you call the roll, please?
Ashley Paddock,
Yes.
Kevin Krulik,
Yes.
Keith Campbell,
Yes.
Jeremy Lawler,
Yes.
Brian Tandy,
Yes.
Dan Bayshore,
Yes.
Lori Gross. Yes. Ali Mullen.
Yes.
Okay, we ready for 2034? Okay, next item on the agenda is docket 2034. Grand Communities requesting a PUD, preliminary plan approval for 115 lot, single-family residential subdivision. The property is zoned SF2, single-family residential. The property is a 57.9 acre parcel between John Bart Road, Edgewood Drive, Washington Street, and Fordyce Road. Okay, Ben?
I would just ask if there's any additional questions we haven't answered already related to the preliminary plan. If there's not, and we've already held the public hearing, so if there's not any additional questions, we'd be ready for a motion on that. Again, it would be a motion to approve or deny, subject to the conditions in the staff report.
Ben, is it fair to say the conditions related to tree preservation and entry signage would be covered by the PUD, or do you want to also see that included with this motion as well?
We've already adequately addressed it with the recommendation on the PUD rezone. Text will be added before the council meeting next Monday evening. Make sure we've got those drafts ready for them next week. So, yeah, I think we've adequately addressed that already.
Okay.
I move to approve docket item 20-34, preliminary plan approval for the Cedar Ridge PUD by Grant Communities, contingent upon accommodation of staff recommendations.
Okay, we have a second?
Second.
Okay, We have a motion and a second. Call the
Ashley
roll,
Paddock?
please.
Oh, sorry. Ashley Paddock,
Yes.
Kevin Krulik,
Yes.
Keith Campbell,
Yes.
Jeremy Lawler,
Yes.
Brian Tandy,
Yes.
Dan Bayshore,
No.
Lori Gross. Yes. Ally Mullen.
Yes.
Okay, motion carried. There's no other business. Ben, we have any other business we have to take care of?
I would just, for those that are here in the audience tonight that want to continue this process, the PUD ordinance will, the first reading will be at the council meeting next Monday evening at 7:15, and then the second reading will be 2 weeks from that date at their first meeting in October.
Okay. Any other question? I have one more motion to be made. Who'd like to make that? To adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you for coming, and see you the next time. Thank you.